Good morning. Good morning, all the assistants. After this morning session, really very heavy. I am now. I have the pleasure to present two people very linked to me, and we have been working all together during decades of years in the Department of Pediatrics and in the Service of Pediatrics of the University, in the Service of Pediatrics Hospital Clínico West. First of all, I will summarize a biography of Professor Javier Estañ Capell, who is Professor of Pediatrics, University of Valencia, Spain, is neonatologist in the Hospital Clínico de Valencia, member of the Research Group of Pediatric Nutrition of INCLIVA, Research Foundation of the Hospital Clinic of the University of Valencia, member as primary researcher of Neonatal Unit Hospital Clínico of different neonatal networks, Society of Spanish Neonatology, INEO, NeoKIS, Inverban, and so on, who authored in 25 scientific papers, indexed in cumulative impact with a cumulative impact factor of 40.65, participating in different multi-center research projects in neonatology, lead numerous doctoral theses and final degree projects, member of different scientific community, as Asociación Española de Pediatría, Sociedad Española de Neonatología, reviewer journal like Nutrients, Análisis Española de Pediatría, and so on. He has spent sometimes in the neonatal unit of the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford with the Professor Andrew Wilkinson and the Professor Richard Moxon. The second speaker is the Professor Cecilia Martinez-Costa, Professor and Chair of Pediatrics, University of Valencia, Head of Pediatric Service, Hospital Clínico, Valencia, Coordinator of the Research Group of Pediatric Nutrition of INCLIVA, an institution I just called, and co-chair of the topic advisory group of nutrition of World Health Organization that works on the classification and terminology of disorders for version of international classification of disease. Participated in 22 research projects, all in quick succession. Of there were national projects and 2 regional projects. In 11, the primary research, and all of them in collaboration with clinical and basic areas, lead a master in pediatric nutrition and numerous doctoral theses and final degree projects. Member of many scientific communities as ESGAN, the European Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology and Nutrition, the Spanish Society of Gastroenterology, Hepatology and Nutrition Pediatrics, and the Spanish Society of Enteral and Parenteral Nutrition. Member of this society in the standardization and protocol group that write the Pediatric Enteral and Parenteral Nutrition Guides. The subject I developed is the subject both of them have worked during decades, and with perspective, very interesting. You can show you can see what I am talking about. The title of his presentation is Nutrition of Infants 0 to 2 years, an impact on future adult health. As you like, Javier.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. I'm going to share my screen in order to start my presentation. I hope everything is okay. You can see the first slide, don't you?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have prepared this presentation, me and Professor Martinez, and I will going to expose this one, and afterwards we will share the last 10 minutes to comment and ask and respond all the questions that can be of interest by the audience. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Below and Professor Brines for his kind invitation, giving us the opportunity to share our knowledge with other colleagues about the importance of nutrition in this amazing period of life in childhood. And it's amazing because this period of life between conception and child's second birthday, referred popularly as the first 1,000 days, is key to lifelong health and well-being. It is a period of rapid growth and neurodevelopment, high nutritional requirements, and high sensitivity to programming effects, and as a consequence, is of great vulnerability. As you can see, this topic has been a major topic of interest, but since the last 10 years. The publications before 2011 were really scant, with a great increase in the last 20 years. During this keynote, I will focus on these 5 main topics: the importance and special characteristics of the first 1,000 days of life, what is the role of optimal nutrition during this period and its consequences for long-term health. Thirdly, we will review human milk composition to understand why breastfeeding provides optimal nutrition during the first 6 months of life and has a key role promoting future health. But we shouldn't forget that after the 6th month, we need to provide, together with human milk and other foods, as complementary feeding. And also, we will review the main characteristics of the diet in the toddler. The key message we should keep in mind is that to provide adequate foods reaching an optimal nutrition and growth is probably one of the most valuable early interventions to promote future health. There are many reasons to justify the special vulnerability of this early period of life. Very rapid growth with a high energy and nutrients requirements and a great impact of nutrition in organs development. The great metabolic, immunological, and cognitive plasticity defines this critical period. Consequently, interventions during these sensitive periods of development can have long-lasting effects in terms of reducing the risk of disease. This is the modern version of the programming theory. Our lifetime health is defined already in utero and in early childhood. Besides, an extended version of the hygiene hypothesis has been introduced to emphasize the intimate interrelationship between diet, the human system, and microbiome with the origins of human disease. Consequences of the intervention during this period can alter growth and maturation, neurodevelopment, and risk of obesity, immune, allergic, or inflammatory diseases. We know since the epidemiological studies of Baker that abnormal growth, even in the womb, has long-term consequences in adult health, especially in non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, obesity. The nutritional environment during pregnancy shapes fetal development, often manifested in persisting changes in blood pressure, cholesterol metabolism, insulin response to glucose, and another metabolic and endocrine parameters. We should consider that an important brain development takes place during the first month, as we will see in the next slide. But also body composition changes throughout the pregnancy and immediately after birth, lessening the water content and increasing the lean mass and fat. intestinal microbiota enhance maturation and functioning of the immune system. The interactions between host and intestinal microbiota are potential factors influencing early programming of the intestinal function. Alterations in intestinal colonization are associated to a higher risk of allergic diseases in childhood. And also, under or overnutrition have a great impact in metabolic organs and gastrointestinal maturation and development. Optimal nutrition in the fetal period and first years is central to the development of healthy brain architecture needed for lifelong cognition. And this statement is easy to understand if we take a look about the huge increase in size and complexity during the first years, mainly in the fetal and the newborn period. The development of the brain starts soon after conception and continues with rapid growth and increased complexity in synaptogenesis and myelination throughout gestation and the first 2 years of life. At birth, an infant brain weighs 1/4 of an adult brain, even though the neonate's body weighs less than 1/10 of adult's body. Importance of specific nutrients from preconception, gestation, and after birth should be considered. Folate and iodine both play crucial roles in fetal neurodevelopment, but are often lacking in the diets of pregnant women. There are another micronutrients that have an special importance for early cognitive development pre and postnatally, like choline, iron, vitamin D, and DHA. And we must be aware to assure enough amount of them in mothers and their offspring diets. To help meeting nutrient requirements, expectant mothers should consume foods that provide carotenoids, choline, folate, iodine, iron, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamin D. It is important to emphasize that adequate nutrition is especially critical for normal central nervous system development. Neurological development is extremely rapid during the first 1,000 days of life, with changes occurring from post-conception up until age 2. Nerve cells proliferate at an extremely rapid pace, especially during early fetal development. This growth culminates in a network of billions of neurons and trillions of neuronal connections by the time of birth. During fetal and early childhood development, the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and sensory systems undergo tremendous development that will not be able to occur later in life. Another aspects are also outstanding when we study the impact of the first years of life on adult health. Regarding non-communicable diseases, we must be aware about the importance of the environment and realize that only 20% of the risk could be associated with genetics. Nutritional habits and style of life that depend on parents and children education, thus can be modified, has a very much relevant role than do genes in the prevalence of non-communicable diseases. Some studies suggest that epigenetic alterations are linked to early life environmental stressors, including mode of delivery, famine, psychosocial stress, severe institutional deprivation, childhood abuse, but also nutrition has a key role. Nowadays, there are enough scientific evidence through epigenetic studies, and we know that changes in the way our genes are expressed can be modulated or modified by nutrition, exercise, and other lifestyle habits. The human being is more susceptible to these epigenetic effects during early life. So we need to encourage future research concerning the best nutrients to provide before and during pregnancy, and also early after birth, to achieve an optimal nutrition, assuring a long and healthy life. Maternal prenatal nutrition and the child's nutrition in the first 2 years of life are crucial factors in a child's neurodevelopment and lifelong health. Child and adult health risks, including obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, may be programmed by nutritional status and health style of life during this critical period. Therefore, this period is considered a window of opportunity to prevent and reduce the prevalence of all these non-communicable diseases, reaching the adulthood in a healthy status. There must be a bidirectional intervention through professionals and childhood educators to instruct the families about healthy nutrition and lifestyle. But also, governments should prioritize public policies that ensure the provision of adequate nutrients and healthy eating habits. This is a period of a huge physiological growth and maturation. Therefore, nutritional requirements are also higher than in another period along life. But we must highlight that what do they eat is as important as how do they learn to eat. So it is a crucial period of responsive feeding practice to achieve a healthy eating habits. With this scenario, everyone should be aware about the impact of nutrition, not only in the present, but also in the future and next generations. So it is very important to consider, firstly, that feeding is a useful tool to promote present and future health. Secondly, that good and healthy feeding habits should be acquired from the beginning. And thirdly, the major changes in feeding take place during the first year of life. Let's take a look to the feeding periods in childhood. Breastfeeding is considered the gold standard for infant feeding and is of crucial importance, influencing infant growth and development, as well as in preventing future diseases during adulthood. But beyond the 6 months of age, human milk do not supply all nutritional requirements, and another food should be introduced as complementary foods. And later on, we should introduce the infant in family meals. Meanwhile, establishment of eating habits is also a key point to be considered. There are many benefits associated with breast milk with short and long-term effects, as you can see in the slide. Lower risk of respiratory tract infections, diarrhea, otitis, but also reduce the incidence of diabetes, obesity, and improves cognitive development. Breast milk is a biological, complex, and living food that adapts to the specific nutritional and immunological requirements of the infant. Formula milk is far away to achieve all these benefits for the infant, so actual recommendation insists on exclusively breastfed infants during the first 6 months unless there is an unsatisfactory growth, and continue breastfeeding until 12 months or even longer after introducing complementary feeding. We must be aware that although human milk has an optimal nutritional composition, its deficiency in vitamins K and D and should be supplemented. Bioactive components of human milk are non-nutritional substances involved in many short and long-term benefits. The composition of human milk is different depending on gestational age, delivery mode, lactation period, and mother's food to genotype. This variable composition facilitates to achieve the different nutritional needs depending on preterm birth, chronological age, delivery mode, and so on. The different periods to be considered are colostrum, mainly during the first week of life, a transitional period the second week, and afterwards, mature milk. As you can see in the slide, the main nutritional characteristic of mature milk includes energy, 67 kilocalories per deciliter, a relative low protein concentration with more weight than caseins. The amount of fats is high but variable depending on mother's diet, and lactose is the main sugar. It's important to consider the role of the bioactive components that include anti-inflammatory, antioxidant factors, hormones, enzymes, growth factors, and immunological components. Human milk bioactive components are crucial to promote health and justify some of the benefits we have just mentioned for babies that are breastfed. There is a huge amount of knowledge around these amazing components and a great interest for future research. Let's review some of these new aspects. Human milk oligosaccharides are complex sugars that are available in human milk. They are the third largest solid component in breast milk after fat and lactose and have no nutritive function. HMOs are responsible for directly stimulating the immune system by promoting good gut bacteria, strengthening the gut barrier function, and blocking pathogens. Human milk oligosaccharides are an exciting and central area of research in infant nutrition. Scientific advances are helping us to know more about the role and importance of these essential components of human milk. Once ingested, HMOs resist degradation and reach the distal parts of the gastrointestinal tract, serving as natural prebiotics and helping to shape the infant gut microbiome with immediate and potential long-term consequences for health and development, including infant growth, body composition, and potential risk of childhood obesity. The main beneficial effects are shown in this slide. Promote neuronal growth and synaptogenesis, improving memory, language, learning skills, and attention. Support the growth of beneficial gut bacteria and metabolites, strengthen gut barrier function, reduction of visceral pain, and regulation of gut contractility. Increase bone strength and mineral density, and also provides adequate growth with no negative impact in body composition. In relation with immune health, they reduce the risk of infection, decreases the infectivity and pathogen load, and support adequate immune response. But HMO composition varies tremendously between different women and to a lesser extent over the course of lactation. Recent research focuses on how fixed and modifiable maternal factors influence HMO variation. So far, maternal genetics appear to be the strongest predictor of oligosaccharide composition in human milk. It is important to understand which maternal factors drive the variation of HMO composition. Analysis of 16 single HMOs revealed changes during the first weeks of lactation without discrepancies between term and preterm milk. Significant difference occur between secretor and non-secretor milk. There are also marked difference in total HMO and single HMO in milk depending on Lewis blood group. In this study, we show that fatty acid profile was similar between the term and the preterm breast milk samples. Omega-3 linoleic and DHA and also omega-6 linoleic acid were the most abundant in the term and preterm samples during lactation. But it's important to see that omega-3 ETA and omega-3 EPA were observed exclusively in the preterm samples. A significantly higher expression of neurotrophic factors was found in the mature preterm milk samples as compared to the mature term samples, as we can see in this slide. Experimental studies have shown the protective effect of GDNF and CNTF in enteric neuronal survival and suggest that breast milk can promote neuronal differentiation in rats. The potential interactions between neurotrophic factors and specific fatty acids could be relevant to the development of the nervous system, and our results found a relationship of the neurotrophic factors CNTF and GDNF with omega-3, EPA, and ETA. And also, it's interesting to observe that cytokine profile show a different trend based on gestational age, maybe as a mechanism of protection of the most vulnerable infants. Cytokine concentration are significantly higher in preterm infants. Another aspect to consider is the microbiota acquisition in early life. One early step in the microbial colonization process is the delivery mode, and afterwards lactation is the main nutritional factor. Regarding delivery mode, infants born by C-section acquire a microbiota with less richness and diversity compared to vaginally born infants. This can contribute babies born vaginally presenting lower ratios of asthma, allergy, respiratory problems, type 1 diabetes, and obesity compared to C-section babies. In addition, the abuse of hygienic measures and antibiotic exposure during pregnancy and during the first month of life also decrease our bacterial diversity, weakening our immune system and increasing the risk of a variety of chronic disorders in later life. This interesting study shows how microbiota richness and composition changes along life, depending on many different factors, mainly age, nutritional status, diet, antibiotic use, hygienic measures, and so on. In summary, the main factors that influence the microbiota are mode of delivery, diet, gestational age, maternal health, postnatal environment, it's different being at home or being hospitalized, antibiotic use, and we don't really know if FAT2 maternal genotype has a direct influence over microbiota. We shouldn't forget that maternal factors contribute to shape infant intestinal microbiota even before birth. Although the development of the human microbiome has been assumed to start at birth and the intrauterine environment has traditionally been considered sterile, this concept is currently changing due to the detection of different microorganisms in placenta, umbilical cord, amniotic fluid, or meconium. Maternal diet and nutritional status can modify oral, intestinal, and vaginal microbiota. An aberrant microbiota can contribute to low-grade inflammation and obesity in the mother, with adverse consequences for pregnancy curves. This interesting study shows how microbiota richness and diversity is different depending on delivery mode and lactation mode. Cesarean section babies show lower diversity and more different microbiota compared with their mothers. Bifidobacterium and lactobacillus still dominate the gut microbiota of breastfed infants at 12 months of age. formula-fed gut microbiota is enriched in species belonging to Clostridia. And cessation of breastfeeding rather than introduction of solid foods is the major driver in the development of an adult microbiota where Bacteroides are the predominant bacteria. Regarding formula feeding, we must consider that there are very few contraindications for breastfeeding. So breastfeeding should be actively promoted, protected, and supported. If we use formula feeding, this formula must meet very high quality and safety standards. Composition should follow current evidence-based recommendations. It's impossible to achieve all human milk benefits through infant formula, variable composition, bioactive components, etc. Follow-up formula for infants should provide an age-adapt nutrient content, higher iron and lower protein concentration, and follow-up formula for young children aged between 1 and 3 years may contribute to improving the supply of critical nutrients, but is not strictly necessary if the children receive a balanced and quality diet. Complementary feeding is defined as the process starting when breast milk alone is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional requirements of infants, so that other foods and liquids are needed along with breast milk. Nutritional and development reasons should be considered in the transition process from milk until reaching family feeding. Talking about complementary feeding, we must consider two main aspects: timing and diet content, and both depend on food availability, cultural factors, and socioeconomic status rather than scientific evidence. That's the reason why international recommendations are really necessary and are very useful to give advice to healthcare professionals and families about the best diet for their infants. Most of the next comments will follow the recommendation established by ESGAN 2017. Energy requirements decreases with the age, as you can see. So do protein requirements, and we should alert about the risk of a higher prevalence of obesity if we maintain a higher intake after the second year of life. Regarding the facts, actual recommendations suggest that they should provide 40% of total energy requirements or even more, including sufficient and balanced amounts of essential fatty acids. DHA contributes to normal brain and visual development. It's important to know that usually Western diets are deficient in omega-3 fatty acids. An adequate balance between omega-3 and omega-6 should be assured. So when the amount of milk ingested decreases, we must promote fish consumption. Palm oil, palm oil, the actual recommendation is that there is insufficient evidence to suggest that palm oil should be avoided as a source of fat in infant formulas for health reasons. Inclusion of high SN2 palmitide fat blend in infant formulas may have short-term effects on stool consistency, but cannot be considered essential. Sugar intake should be limited regarding free sugar. And how? Through education, improve labeling, restriction of advertising, introducing standards for kindergarten and school meals. The current recommendation from American Academy of Pediatrics regarding fruit juice are shown in this slide, being the most outstanding issues that there are no nutritional benefits for infants. Fruit drinks, however, are not nutritionally equivalent to fruit juice, and the excessive consumption of juice is associated with diarrhea, flatulence, abdominal distension, and tooth decay. Iron deficiency is the most common micronutrient deficiency worldwide, and young children are a special risk group because their rapid growth leads to a high iron requirements. Follow-on formulas should be iron fortified. However, there is not enough evidence to determine the optimal iron concentration in follow-on formula. From the age of 6 months, all infants and toddlers should receive iron-rich foods, including meat products that provide M-iron with a 25% of intestinal absorption, and non-M-iron from legumes, nuts, vegetables, fortified cereals, with less viability that could be increased in combination with red meat. It is also important to consider the difference in iron absorption between breast milk and infant formula. A modified cow's milk should not be fed as the main milk drink to infants before the age of 12 months, and the intake should be limited to less than 500 milliliters per day. Regarding gluten, it can be introduced anytime between 4 and 12 months, but we must avoid large quantities of gluten. And it has been shown that neither any breastfeeding nor breastfeeding during gluten introduction has been shown to reduce the risk of celiac disease. Sorry. Vitamin D should be supplemented in all infants during the first year and beyond if there is associated risk factors. And regarding allergies food, actual recommendations are do not delay. Complementary feeding schedule depends on different issues, but is mainly limited by infants' organ maturation. But we have enough evidence that renal and gastrointestinal function are sufficiently mature to metabolize nutrients from complementary feeding by age of 4 months. And that to a large degree, gastrointestinal maturation is driven by foods ingested. And considering neurodevelopment, it's likely that there is a range between 4 and 6 months at which infants attain the necessary motor skills to cope with safety with solid foods. Complementary feeding schedule we must follow this recommendation for complementary feeding schedule. Exclusive breastfeeding should be promoted for at least 4 months, and exclusively or predominant breastfeeding for approximately 6 months is considered a desirable goal. Complementary foods should not be introduced before 4 months, but should not be delayed beyond 6 months. And this is the recommended schedule with the different foods that should be provided. Feeding and preference development can be acquired even before birth. Infants learn about the changing flavor profile of the amniotic fluid, which reflects the mother's dietary choices during pregnancy, and continues through breastfeeding because infants learn about the changing flavor profile of breast milk, which reflects the mother's dietary choices during lactation. Infants learn about the flavor profile of the milk they are fed, which is invariant and does not reflect dietary choices when we are bottle feeding. And talking about toddlers' diet, we must be aware about that everything that the changes in growth and body composition are the main characteristics of the childhood. Between the birth and the age of 3 years, toddler height doubles. And by the age of 3 years, toddler weight increases by 3 or 4 times. A balanced diet in the toddler is essential for healthy growth and development. And this key stage of life, diet also influences gastrointestinal tract development and gut microbiota. Energy protein intake above the requirements is associated with an increased risk of overweight and obesity. A healthy diet is based on offering a variety of foods from the 5 main food groups to meet their increased nutritional needs. These are the 5 main groups of foods that should be kept in every diet of the toddlers. Dairy, proteins, we should avoid highly processed poultry, fish, or meat. Vegetables and fruits, half of the plate should be vegetables and fruits, and grains, at least half should be whole grains. For many toddlers, the intake of some key nutrients, calcium, fiber, iron, vitamin D, is below recommendation, and we should limit the amount of added sugars, salt, and saturated fats in toddlers' diet. It's very important to consider that healthy habits need to be established early in life. Exposure to a variety of foods options and responsive feeding practice play an important role in helping toddlers learn healthy eating. From a dietary perspective, early childhood is a period of life when food preference and eating behaviors, which are influenced by parental feeding practice and role modeling, are firmly established. Food preference and eating behaviors have been shown to track into later life and provide foundation for either good or poor health in later childhood and adulthood. The main issues to consider for a responsive feeding are provide healthy foods. Child decides how much to eat. Also listen to hunger and satiety. Cues and trust the child. Provide a structured mealtime environment. Act as a positive role model and encourage autonomous and self-feeding. In summary, an extensive body of evidence is already available and continuously growing, addressing in the relationship between nutrition in early life and the development of the disease later in childhood, as well as in adult age. The first 1,000 days from conception to 24 months are a temporal window within which some of the most powerful non-communicable diseases risk factors seem to be identifiable. A clear understanding of the several different mechanisms involved in their interrelation is of outstanding importance, particularly for the pediatrician. Maternal influences during gestation, breastfeeding, and early diet implementation all present potential targets for medical and public health intervention aimed at reducing the incidence of these diseases. It's a very complex scenario where the interaction between maternal nutrition mechanism, modifying microbiota, child nutrition, genes, and environment has an impact in the present and the future health. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very
Very-
much.
Thank you very
for that
much,
wonderful
Javier, for
presentation.
this excellent and up-to-date perfect. I am astonished how much have you improved after my retirement of the hospital clinical. My next life, I will retire earlier. Questions, please. Questions?
No question, but a comment. I am very proud to have invited Javier and Cecilia because the communication was excellent and the slides were very clear and support by a text precise and complete. And I hope that it will be transformed in article.
We will try to do our best with that aspect. Don't
It's
worry.
It's not only the other article on all the, but if you have an article in preparation in the first 1,000 days, you choose. It's not necessary to have. It's maybe one part who work. It's a very interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any question more? Any comment? No question? No comments?